Good morning, everybody. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about archaeology. And what we want to do is figure out how do we know what we know about the first Americans. And we do that through the work of archaeologists. So essentially, you have to know that what archaeologists do is recover material evidence from the past. They are scientists and they are trained like any other scientist in the scientific method. They make hypotheses and then they have to come up with evidence for that hypothesis. That artifacts, that material evidence is where they prove or disprove their theories. And specifically, we want to look at what the archaeological evidence is that are coming out of early Indian settlements in southeastern Virginia along the Nottoway River. So first, there's a couple of key terms that we have to know. So number one, culture is a group's way of life. And that includes their art, their music, food, religion, how they spend their work and their free time. In other words, what is important to them? And so archaeologists tell what's important to people by the artifacts, by the evidence that they leave behind. Here are a couple of examples of that. If I walked into this guy's living room, I don't even have to talk to him before I figure out what this guy he's into, where he likes to spend his time, money, and effort. And it's sort of abundantly obvious here by these artifacts that are left in this room. Now remember, for an artifact to be an artifact, it must be used, shaped, made by humans. Finding an old stick does not make you a great archaeologist, okay? But these things like this, since they have been created by humans, even though they were at one time a natural resource, these are now artifacts, human created, these types of things, and certainly the other things in the room. And example number two, we have this fella. I can walk into his den and I know where he likes to spend his weekends, what's important to him, what team he follows. Just absolutely clear by the artifacts in the room. That's what an artifact is. It gives us a clue about people. And I have a pretty good clue based on what I see in this room. All right, so some other key terms. Behavior. Behavior is, simply put, what people do. This is usually an expression of culture. If NASCAR is that thing that is important to you, the behavior that comes from that is going to the races, buying the merchandise, reading about your sport and the people in your sport, watching the television interviews. Those things, those are behaviors that are based upon, that come out of your culture, that importance of your sport. We're going to take it back way before the two examples that I gave you and talk about Paleo Indians. Paleo means ancient or old. Don't call Grandma Paleo, she won't appreciate it. These were the very first Indians to cross the Bering Land Bridge from Asia and move into America. They did that during the Ice Age, which is a period of very cold weather that happened to have animated talking animals. Okay? Not really. So here's that Bering Land Bridge. This would be modern day Russia. This would be modern day Alaska. And this would be the Bering Sea. This would all be covered over in water. But during the last ice age, thousands of years ago, water cycle was broken and water went up. It evaporated and it condensed and precipitated, but there it stayed. Because it was so cold, it was locked up in snow and ice, and it never went and ran off into the rivers, lakes, oceans, and started the cycle again. Over thousands of years, the sea levels dropped. And what you actually have is the sea floor became exposed. And so these Paleo Indians, following animal herds, migrated. That's a word you got to know, moving from place to place. They migrated from Asia across this Bering Land Bridge into North America. And that happened during the last ice age. So these people were nomads. They were people who moved from place to place with no fixed home. Paleo Indians were generally nomads. They survived because they were hunter-gatherers, and that means exactly what it sounds like. They did not plant crops. Agriculture had not been invented yet, and anyway, it was the Ice Age. Wouldn't have gone so well. They hunt by following the herds of animals, and they gather up what plants they can eat along the way, and that's where they get their fruits and vegetables. Okay, so hunter-gatherers hunt and gather wild plants. No agriculture yet. That's what creates civilization as we know it. When people can understand agriculture, the planting and the cultivation of crops, they begin to stay in one place. They stop being nomadic. Because if you're a nomad, you're not going to create much in the way of art, musical instruments, things like that, because you are going to either have to leave it or carry it with you everywhere you go for the rest of your life. When people can stay in one place, they really start to develop those other ancillary cultural traits that we think about. So along comes the archaeologist. You'll notice how, again, these are scientists, and they mark off their archaeological dig sites. They dig in grids, little squares, and they hook, one square to the other, not just holes here and there. Archaeology study human behavior and culture, and they get that through the recovery and analysis of artifacts. Okay? Archaeologists study human behavior and culture. And because of these new recent discoveries, here in Virginia, as a matter of fact, scientists are not in agreement as to when and how people entered the Western Hemisphere. For years, the last 50 years, when I was in school, we said, we've got it figured out. We know how and when the first people got here. 12,000 years ago, they migrated across that Bering Land Bridge, and that's what happened. But now, new evidence is revising our theories. We think, well, maybe that did happen, but a lot of other things probably happened too. What is causing us to doubt that are these discoveries made in Cactus Hill, Virginia. And here's a great picture you can see of those grids, how precisely they dig down and measure here. You can see his ruler, because they have to keep very, very detailed records. They have to keep very detailed records about where something is found, not just on a level plane of north, south, east, and west, but also was it 3 inches deep, 6 inches deep, 12 inches deep? And that's why their dig sites look like they do. So Cactus Hill is now one of the oldest archaeological sites in the United States. It's located along the Nottoway River in southeastern Virginia. You got to know where it is. Nottoway River in southeastern Virginia. Well, we've been teaching that the first people, the first Paleo Indians, were a group of Paleo Indians specifically called Clovis Indians, because they were known for a spear point that they made that was first found in Clovis, New Mexico. And they called the people that made that particular spear point Clovis people. That was the oldest thing we had ever found up to that point. And we said, all right, 10, 12,000 years ago, the Clovis people migrated across. They were hunter-gatherers. They created this type of spear point. That's what they did. It's figured out. But now people are digging deeper, figuratively and literally, and they dug past that Clovis layer at Cactus Hill and found stuff that was significantly deeper and thus thousands of years earlier than the Clovis people. So whereas we thought, maybe 10, 12,000 years ago, now we're thinking it's more like 15, 18,000 years ago, the first people came to North America. So this is one of the oldest sites in North America, and it's in Virginia. So the other problem that creates is if the people had come across the Bering Land Bridge from Asia into Alaska, we would expect that the oldest archaeological sites would be found along the west coast. But now, things like Cactus Hill, the oldest archaeological sites, are being found along the east coast. And so that's causing us some problems here in our theory. Okay, and here's some examples of the things that have been found at Cactus Hill. And you can see that they're pretty rough because they show that the Clovis point was pretty well made. These things are less well made. And so it shows us that the technology, the hunting point, evolved over time, as it should have. Okay, because if you're working on something for roughly 5,000 years, it should get better. You can see here you've got these points, and then you've got some over here, some Clovis points, and they're much, much better shape, finely made. So that tells us that, okay, the things that we're finding deeper, which would indicate that they're older, they're less well refined, which would indicate that they're older. So the science is really lining up here. Like I said, if the Paleo-Indians had come down from Asia across the Bering Land Bridge, old sites would be on the west coast. But we're finding old sites on the east coast. That kind of wraps up what you need to know here, and we want to make it short, simple, to the point. So you've got some key terms, archaeology, why is it important, and specifically, why is the archaeology at Cactus Hill important? Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it.